first rule is this: if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. Most of the things that people do, most of the behaviors in which they engage when they're up here on the stage, involve trying to do way too many things at one time. And it's the attempt to manage all these different things at one time that help to fuel the anxiety people feel. We're going to show you that the way to do it right is to figure out how to work much more simply than what you're used to.
Most of the problems people have when they speak come from the fact that they're trying to do way too many things at once. They try to keep track of way too many variables. They try to, well, they have too many things going on in their head at one time. They're working too hard, and if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong.
In fact, obviously everybody knows that today we live in a very multitasking environment, right? We're expected to do all sorts of things at the same time. The greatest thing about speaking, when you speak before a group, is if you're doing it right, you learn how to do what I guess man did at one time in his history. It's called unitasking. Unitasking, it's a word, I don't know if it's in the dictionary, but it's unitasking. It means doing one thing at a time, and that's the beautiful thing about it. I often tell people I hardly think I'm ever working when I'm speaking, because it's one of the easiest things I can do. I never have more than one thing that I'm thinking about at one time, and we'll see how this works.
The second rule is that when you do it right, it's always a win-win for both you and the audience.
If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing at any given time, the speaker wins, the speaker gets benefits, and the audience gets benefits at the same time. It's always a back and forth.
Finally, the third rule is probably the most difficult one for people to actually engage in practice. But it's probably the most important too. And that is this: people only start listening when you stop talking. See, most people think that getting up in front of a group is all about opening their mouth and impressing the audience with the breadth and depth of their knowledge. And that usually means a continuous stream of words that come from the presenter's mouth. The problem, as you'll see, is when people do that, audiences don't have a chance to really listen. All of the best speakers out there, people you consider to be great speakers, know this rule, that people only start to listen to you once you stop talking.
And if you think about that, just think about some of the best jokes you've ever heard. Think about a comedian who delivers a joke. Some of the ones that are really funny are the ones that it takes you a second or two after the punchline's delivered, before your brain can process what was really said, as opposed to what you thought it was going to be. And when you hear that, wow, that's funny, you start to laugh. People only start to listen after you stop talking. What can we say? What do we see here as far as eyes? What would you say about eye contact? Good. Hands, okay. Hands, it was kind of difficult to tell what they were doing with their hands, because, of course, at a podium, as soon as your hands touch the podium, 10,000 volts, right? Difficult. And standing, of course, the same. How about their pace at which they spoke, the speed? Pretty good. We weren't bored, weren't waiting for the next word. Volume and inflection, we were all able to hear. Well, you got mic'd up, so it's a lot easier. That's cheating. And any ums and ahs? Do we hear ums and ahs? Yeah. A few.
Eye contact is the one thing that, as you'll see, is probably the most critical to getting your point across. The trouble with eye contact is that for most of us, at some point, you probably got this bit of advice. Anybody hear this before? Look at everyone in the group. So we were told that that's a good thing, that you want to look at everybody in the group. The problem is that nobody ever told us exactly how to do that. And so as a result, what we see every single time we do this is a phenomenon that we call aerosol eyes.
And it kind of looks like this. Speaker's up in front of the room, and that's what people do. They get up, and knowing that it's a good thing to look at everyone in the audience, they tend to spray the audience with their vision. Well, sometimes when we speak, we tend to look down the whole time like this, hoping there's notes on the podium or the floor. Sometimes when we speak, we look up like this, hoping we'll find divine inspiration. But for the most part, people tend to do just this: spray the audience with their vision. Never holding eye contact for more than a second at a time. And you understand that that causes a few problems.
When you're in a situation in front of a group like this, what your brain instantly knows is, uh-oh, I got a problem. The problem is there's only one of me and there's a whole bunch of them. It's a classic case of one against many. And every time the brain determines that it's in a situation where there's one against many, the fight or flight sequence kicks in.
What's the problem here? Well, first of all, we have a problem in the fact that when you get up here and speak and do the aerosol eye thing, you send a message to audiences. In fact, most business presenters have trained audiences to feel that it's okay to step back once from the whole presentation process. I mean, if I were to get up here and say, "Hi, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is D Jefferys, and I want to thank you all for coming here tonight." And for the next 85 minutes or so, what you'll notice is I will never look any one of you directly in the eye. In fact, to me, you're not even really people. You're just this one big amorphous blob. And that's what we do. We give audiences permission that it's okay to feel this lack of connection because they can't possibly feel connected when there's never any real meaningful contact. The other thing is that when people get up and speak and they start engaging in behaviors that pump up the anxiety, the audience never sees the speaker, never sees quite the level of an anxiety that the speaker might herself feel, but it still emanates to some degree. Anything that you do which projects a concept of nervousness, the lack of comfort on your part, does exactly the wrong thing you want when you're trying to impart people with new information. You're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which applies to societies, really. But it's the same basic principle, is that, unfortunately, reality is that for every one of you out here, the most important thing on your mind are your basic comforts. And you know this to be true, right? Sitting in the audience, if you're cold, if you're hot, you're thinking about that. If the program's been going on too long and you're hungry or you're thirsty, you're thinking about that. If your bladder's full, that's number one priority. Number one priority is, when is this going to be over so I can hit the restroom, correct? And that's what happens. So anything you do to make an audience feel uncomfortable gets them thinking about something other than your program. And if you want to achieve true knowledge transfer, which is what a presentation is supposed to be all about, again, you, the speaker, and every individual in the audience have to be on the same page, on the same wavelength every step of the way. You can't give them any reason to be thinking of things other than your message. In Western civilization, what do we typically connect with looking people in the eye? What message does it send when we look people in the eye? Trust, yes, thank you. Tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Veracity, you can be believed. As well as the opposite, when you look away, you send the message that you're not telling the truth. When you can't hold eye contact with somebody while you're trying to tell them that you got the greatest product in the world, or, "No, Your Honor, I wasn't anywhere near there that night." When you look at somebody and you expect them to, and you want them to tell you the truth, you expect them to look in your eye. Tell me, did you take that last cookie from the cookie jar? We associate eye contact with telling the truth, with the possible exception of presidents of the United States. It's very difficult for humans to just look someone in the eye, "I did not," and lie. And lie. We don't do it very well. We associate eye contact with telling the truth, and we associate looking away with not telling the truth, right? Besides the fact that it all runs up against rule number one, which is if you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. Which is you're thinking about what you're going to say next. In fact, for most speakers, the most important thing on their mind, their number one thing on their mind, is the next thing they're going to say. So they're always thinking about that next thing they're going to say. And in order to do that, we've got to stack up thoughts. You've got to stack up like 6, 8, 10 thoughts at once in this queue, so that as the words come out of your mouth, you got the next one to come down. Then you couple that with the fact that now you figure out, how am I going to distribute all this? So again, we're creating thoughts up here,
and we have the words coming out, and then
we listen to the words coming out of our mouths like this. We're like automatic peasants, right? So then we try to send on, and now we're distributing all of. That's doing too many things. Solution we call lock, talk, and pause. Lock, talk, and pause. And it looks like this. Instead of aerosol eyes, it involves the speaker actually engaging individuals in the audience. It actually involves the speaker having eye contact with individuals in the audience as he or she delivers the thoughts that she wants to say. Involves locking eyes with one person. You're never talking to a group of people. You're only ever talking to people in a group. Okay? You're never talking to a group of individuals. You're always speaking to the individuals in the group. So when you're speaking, you need to give your speech as a series of one-on-one conversations, talking to one person at a time. a series of one-on-one conversations.
Then, as we mentioned before, probably the most difficult thing that people can learn to do, though, is once they've completed that thought to that one person, is to pause before they move on to the next. It's all about the pause. The pause is what we mean when we say that people only start listening to you once you stop talking.
And if we don't engage in behaviors such as talking to one person at a time, such as forgetting the fact that there are 200 people out here, because it really doesn't matter how many people there are. When you're doing it right, you're only speaking to one person at a time. People ask me, what's the greatest number of people you've ever delivered to? And I say, one. Because that's what I do. I'm never speaking to more than one person at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm delivering what I have to say to one person, finishing my thought, and then again, the hardest part, I'm pausing. I'm pausing before turning to the next person and giving the next person my thought.
So, when you're doing it right, it looks a little bit more like this. First thing you want to know, by the way, whenever you get up to speak to a group of people, before you get out of your seat and come up here, pick. So, it's like this, lock. When you lock on somebody, when you have a clear target, it allows you to clear your brain of all the other things other than that person to whom you're speaking. It's a matter of keeping track of a lot less information. And then, when you do lock on one person, it facilitates conversation that audiences look to today in terms of having a believable presentation experience. What people appreciate today is they want to know you as a person. They come to hear you speak because they want to hear what you have to say about your topic. John Kennedy was a very significant person in the speaking world because he was really the bridge. He was the bridge from the old style, the old oratory style, to the new humanistic style. In fact, that's what Kennedy brought to the whole process. Kennedy was the first president who was actually human. Well, he was. He would, at press conferences, you never know. Somebody asked a question, he'd crack a joke. Well, presidents didn't joke before then. That wasn't part of it, you had to maintain a certain stature, You were the president of the United States. And Jack Kennedy brought being human into the whole process of speech, first time out. And that is, it's actually in the pause where you create your entire presentation. For 99% of all business speakers, you're up here talking, and the most important thing on your mind is always the next thing you're going to say. So you're always processing that next thing. And while you're processing that next thing to say, of course, there are words coming out of your mouth. The quality of those words coming out of your mouth are severely eroded by the fact that you're trying to come up with that next thing you're going to say. With this method of lock, talk, and pause, it's about never thinking 5 minutes down the road, 1 minute down the road, 15 seconds down the road. What you're always thinking about, the most important thing on your mind, is the next time you're going to pause. See, I only have to keep track of, that's right, one thought. I have to keep track of one thought, and who am I giving it to? I'm not trying to distribute it all around once a second. I'm giving that one thought to one person. I'm maintaining eye contact with that person through that thought. There, it's done. And when you're only creating that one thought at a time, what happens is you find that the quality of the words that come out of your mouth tends to increase. You tend to speak in fully structured sentences. You tend to say things that create a sentence that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, typically a subject, some action, and an object. You tend to say fewer words, but the words that you do say are much more full of meaning because you're not just appending on. It only works when the most important thing on your mind is the next time you're going to pause. So here's what happens. The benefit, of course, is when you do engage people one-on-one, when you're able to look people in the eye, you send a message not of being anxious, but of being confident. Because obviously you can't look somebody in the eye unless you feel right about what you're going to say. And so when you send this message of confidence, it makes the audience, instead of being uncomfortable by watching all your nervous reactions, it helps to make them more comfortable. The other thing you do, of course, when you look people in the eye is we send this message of sincerity. And then finally, when indeed, no matter how big your group, when you can indeed look them in the eye and talk, when you can think in these nice structured sentences, when you give people the time to hear what you last said before you ask them to build onto that with the next bit of information, you are able to create a two-way communication with your audience. And this two-way communication, because you're sending the message that oh, that's right, I'm actually talking, that presenter's actually talking to me. I mean, he wasn't talking to me the whole time, but he kept coming back to me. And you get the impression that the presenter actually cares about you as an audience member, learning, understanding what he has to say. And so what you do is you end up creating a bond with the audience that is so totally unlike the relationship you have when you are spewing into the ether, never holding eye contact. So it changes your whole approach. And what happens is you then end up getting huge amounts of positive feedback when people look at you rather than looking out to an audience. And those times where you do maybe hold eye contact for a couple seconds, what do you typically see? You see people with their heads down working their BlackBerries or doing anything other than being engaged with you. It works both ways. It's a win-win. You feel better, you're processing a lot less, your anxiety is way down, and the audience is getting the benefits of knowing that you're making them comfortable and you're telling the truth. When you're doing it right, it's always a win-win for both the audience and the speaker.
The reason a pause is so important is the pause when you speak is equivalent to the paragraph in the written word.
It's that simple. How many people like to read textbooks that have nothing but solid text over a page? No breaks, no anything? I remember some chemistry books, physics books. You know, you look at a page, it's completely filled with text, no breaks whatsoever. Your brain looks at it and goes, no, I don't think so, and you close the book.
Now, you take a newspaper. Think about a newspaper. Anybody know how many sentences there are in the average newspaper paragraph? 2. USA Today, 1. But really, pick up a newspaper, and the average numbers of sentences in a paragraph is 2. Because why? Well, newspapers are in the business of trying to deliver new information to people quickly. They know they have one shot to give it to you, because most people don't hold on to newspapers. They don't, they're not reference material. They read them through, and then they toss them in the trash on their way off the train. So the process of getting information, a lot of new information to people quickly, involves being able to parcel it out into nice little bite-sized morsels that the brain can ingest. The paragraph is a big key to that. Think about it. When a paragraph comes out, you read across paragraph, 1 sentence, 2 sentences, and then what do you get? You get nice white space. That white space is brain rest. And then even before we ask you to take in more information, we give you a little more white space, a little more brain rest. That's what a paragraph's all about. Well, the pause in speech works exactly the same way. That in order to get your audience to really take in what you have to say, you got to learn to stop talking. Stop talking long enough for them to ingest that last thing you said, get a picture of it, try to put it into a context that they know before moving on to the next thing you're going to say.
And it also provides for those few times that maybe you do run out of something to say and you pause. Well, if you're like most people and you talk on and on and on and on, continually on, eventually your mouth can outrun your brain. And then when that happens, the pause that comes because you can't think of what you're going to say next can be very pregnant.
The pause is absolutely the most important thing you can do. People have a hard time appreciating that because they think that speaking is about speaking. You learn to establish the pace. You learn that what speaking is all about is finding one person, giving one thought, and then having one pause. One pause long enough for them to ingest the last thing you said. One person, one thought, one pause.
And then finally, probably the most important thing is by breaking information down and giving people these frequent, constant chances to hear that last thing, it helps them to build a picture of what you're talking about in their mind. In other words, they take a building block, they hear that, all right, got that, rest, all right, and the next thing you say, they build on top of that, next thing you say, you build on top of it. And people can much more clearly not just hear what you say, but they in this picture, they can engage a lot more senses. They can become part of it. And your message gets through much more deeply.
Mark Twain gets a lot of things attributed to him that he never said, but one of the things he did say was that the right word may be effective, but no word was ever as effective as a rightly timed pause. Somebody shout out the name of somebody in public life that they would consider to be a good public speaker. So it's about eye contact. Effective speaking requires finding one person in the audience to whom you're going to give a thought. Give that entire thought to one person. Carry on a series of one-on-one conversations with each and every member of the audience, and then learning how to pause, giving them a moment for all that to sink in before you move on to the next person. If we were to ask at the end of your last presentation how each of these three aspects affected the audience or impacted the audience, how do you think these three items would add up to, say, 100%? How important are each one of these? What you had to say, what you sounded like when you said it, or how you looked? Survey says how you look. 55% of the impact you have in the audience is based on how you look. And not, was she wearing an Armani suit? You know, did she have diamond? It's how did the speaker comport herself? Did she look comfortable? Did she look confident? Same thing when it comes to how you sound. 38% of your impact is how you sound. And what you have to say? Not that much. How you sound sends those same type of images because people know that if somebody can say something in a nice strong voice, that they probably believe it. Most of us aren't very good at saying things we don't believe or saying things we're not sure of in a very loud voice. Think of times when you go to a party, you're introduced to a whole bunch of people, and then throughout the night, somebody comes up, you go, "Hi, Bob, how you going? Good party? Yeah. Hi, Sally, having a good time?" Then you see somebody you don't quite know. "Hey, how are you?" We tend to mumble through, don't we? Anybody like to sing in the car? Radio comes on, sing in the car? When you're alone, what kind of volume do you sing at? Pretty high. How about when somebody else is in the car? Yeah. See, when we're by ourselves, it really doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about how good our voice is, but when we're not sure how we sound, we tend to throttle it back. Right? So just like eye contact sends strong signals about credibility, our voice, the volume we put behind the words, says loads about how strongly we feel, how confident we feel in the words that we say. The unfortunate thing about this study here, of course, is most presenters spend all their time coming up with what they're going to say. They think it's all about what they say. Most of the presentations we see, and most of the presenters we see, are hamstrung by the fact that they try to say way too much in a presentation. They try to get across way too many sets of facts, especially those about which they don't really strongly know or believe or are passionate about. Anybody know who Peggy Noonan is? Anybody know that name, Peggy Noonan? She was a speechwriter for President Reagan. She writes a column in the Wall Street Journal. She's written a number of books on public speaking. One of her favorite sayings when talking about the audience is that they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Pretty simple saying, but it's strong when you think about it. Audiences are moved by your passion. In fact, passion is really the only thing that people listen to. People need to know how strongly you believe in what you say. And when you believe in something, they're going to be moved by it. Great speakers know that. Bill Clintons of the world know that. That the words, the 130-point program for America is worthless. A 3-point program for America about which you could really speak with some tremor, some depth, with some confidence is what's going to move people. It's not about your message, it's about how you say it. So what this is leading to is how then, once you've established this eye contact, so that the audience believes you, and you make them comfortable, and once you've realized that it's all in the pause, where you're going to be creating your next thought, one thought at a time, delivered to one person at a time, how then do you take it to the next level and get people emotionally involved? Gestures go back to rule number 2. When you're doing it right, it's a win-win for both the speaker and the audience. Remember the 3 rules. If you're working too hard, you're doing it wrong. When you're doing it right, it's a win-win. And third, people only start listening when you stop talking. But the way gestures work as a win-win is when you actually get your body involved to paint a picture of what you're saying. And what I mean by this is that for the audience, using gestures allows them to see a better picture of what you're trying to say, or at the same time for the presenter, it gives the presenter an opportunity to get rid of all this excess energy that's running through. Every time you move a muscle, we're burning calories. We're burning up this energy. And by being able to move your body, get the body involved, you dispense with much of that excess energy. What happens with the audience is it involves more of their senses. I mean, I could get up to the podium and I could tell you all about all the great things that are going to happen here. And I can do it. But of course, the trouble with podiums is when your hands get attached, it's the 10,000 volts and they never come off. So you can't really get the rest of your body involved. So now you have this static picture of somebody speaking. But when you get your body involved, you involve more senses. You get people to, that's right. And we all know that we remember so much of what we hear, but we remember significantly more about what we hear and see. We actually remember most about what we hear, see, and do, which is why in training we often try to do exercises to get people involved, but we increase significantly the impact we have on audiences when we engage more of their senses. And gestures will do just that.
Also, you can tend to reinforce words so that you just don't talk, well, it's very important that we get our profits up and we get our costs down. You say it's very important that we get our profits up here and we get our costs down here. Because see, it's a difference between, we have your sales up, we get sales up here and our costs down here. The difference between sales and costs is profit. And profit, oh, that's right, that's where profit sharing comes from.
So we reinforce words and they make them stronger than just the sounds coming out of our voice.
And also, using your body, getting your body involved is a good way to overcome occasional attention gaps on the part of the audience. Anybody here willing to admit that since the start of this program that they had maybe a thought or two outside this room? I'm hurt.
In fact, I'm done. Thank you. No, stop. They want me to go. Attention gaps. Again, we're multitaskers. We're sent to presentations. We're sent to hear people talk, and yet we've got all kinds of things in our minds, like that call that we didn't make to the client, or that report that has to get out, or that's right, maybe we were even thinking about that little discussion we had with our spouse before we left the house this morning.
Nobody comes to a presentation carrying this excess of attention.
You never have 100%. You have maybe 85 if you're lucky. Well, the point is, so with these different attention, and when audiences lose attention, one of the problems is they'll drift off, they'll start thinking about something else. And then when they do start to come back, they hear something and they go, what was that? And then they start trying to think what last thing you said. Of course, you're still speaking, and so now the attention gap still continues because they're thinking about something and you're talking about something different. The point is, by using gestures, being able to fill attention gaps, people can see, and sometimes you just get over that gap and you don't lose them once again. Audiences, we give audiences all the opportunities they want to go off on these journeys of self-discovery. Your job is to keep them all on your particular path.
The energy that you throw out works not just to your benefit because you're getting rid of that nervous energy, but it works for the audience's benefit because you're more comfortable and they're more comfortable.
Now, what happens, unfortunately, is that people often engage in gestures that aren't very effective. One we see here is the arrogant stance. You see this is the CEO, or this is the one that we call it the George Patton stance. You know, this one.
No poor bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won a war by making some other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
It sends a signal of arrogance, which most people don't. Like this one, we call the phone booth, crossed arms. This is one that we see a lot. This is probably the most common thing people do when they get up is they tend to hug themselves, you know. This is comfortable, actually. I like this. Actually, I love me. This is good, you know? I feel really secure like this. But the problem is if I try to talk about having to get sales up and we have to get our expenses down, you know, you're limited by having your arms completely locked together in terms of the impact that you can have. So, and again, think about this. Think where the energy is going now when I'm like this. It just, or even when we do this, you know, the prisoner. We often see this.
Well, here's one we see. We call this the fig leaf, which is not. We see more men do this than women.
The only thing worse than the fig leaf is the talking fig leaf. You know, when they start to do the gestures and they do. One of the most common things you see, we have the key changer, where, because, and again, men probably more than women are more comfortable when they have their hands in their pockets. Johnny Carson used to have his hand in his pocket. Is anybody old enough to remember Johnny Carson? Okay. And he would often talk like this, had one hand in his pocket. Fortunately, Johnny Carson is a great example of, and when I told you before, you'll never look at a presenter in the same way again. The problem is that all the rules that we talk about, all the ways to do things right, are often broken by people who can. Those people who can break rules because they have what we don't, and that's called charisma. It's true. Believe me. We've been trying to quantify charisma for 20 years. If we could, we'd package it, put it in a class, and charge $100,000 a day for it. Because you could go on to be president if you had charisma. You could be like Bill Clinton, and if you have charisma, you can get away with almost anything. One of the things people with charisma can get away with is breaking the rules when it comes to speaking. Johnny Carson had a lot of charisma. You could do that. But the point is, hands in your pockets are not a great thing. First of all, if you notice this, if I were to shake my pockets, notice that you don't hear anything. Often when somebody's shaking the pocket, the audience are going, hey, it sounds like a couple quarters, dime. See? He's got about 85 cents in there, I think. What do you think? So if I were to shake mine, you wouldn't hear anything, because as a professional, what I do is I empty my pockets before speaking. But the trouble, of course, with the hands in the pockets, it restricts your ability to reinforce a word. So you try to talk about, we got to get our sales up, we got to get our costs down, want the whole company together on this, all right? The idea with gestures is to always have as much air under the wings available as possible. And the only way you can really do that is to put your hands to what we call the neutral position. You just let them drop by your side. You just have to learn to not think about them so that when you do want to make a point, they're right there to do it. So typically it's just this, feet shoulder width apart, hands to neutral, unless you're using them to gesture. It's that simple. If you can't do anything that you learned here today, if you do nothing else, you take nothing home, you learn this one, is that all great communicators knew how important it was to smile. When we talk about eye contact, we talk about, really, I always preface it by saying in Western civilizations, Western cultures, we tend to associate eye contact with telling the truth. But there are other cultures where eye contact is not appropriate, or eye contact has more rules. Typically in Asia, cultures there demand a certain level of equality with the person who's looking you in the eye. If you're in Japan and you work for the company as a middle manager, you can't look the CEO in the eye, right? Just that's how it works. Well, there was a woman from Africa who explained to me that in her country, what it came down to was this, that if you didn't look somebody in the eye, they didn't trust you. If you looked them in the eye too long, they didn't trust you. So the whole key was maintaining eye contact and smiling, because the eye contact showed the trust, but the smile disarmed any threat that people felt by holding eye contact, which I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah, many times the body language of the audience will tell you how you're doing. Looking out to an audience, seeing many people asleep is usually not a good thing. That usually comes from speaking without passion. It comes from speaking in a monotone. Tone and inflection are not only important to get people involved, but the interesting thing about tone and inflection is it's true that the exact same words with different inflections on different words changes the meaning. I didn't say he stole the money. 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 We can say the same things, same exact words, and here's the problem you get into with scripts, or if you think that speaking is about following a script, about saying a set of preset words, is that any time you try to work from a script, it tends to flatten out your delivery, and you often lose the inflection that's very important on any one given word, where, as you can see, can often completely change the meaning of what it is you have to say. So inflection's a good thing. Changes in pitch and tone is a good thing. It helps to show passion, helps to keep interest up. It's very difficult to use a lot of tone and inflection if you're trying to deliver a preset set of words. It's real important that when everything we talk about, using gestures and getting this passion out, the fact that people only are ever inspired by the passion behind what you say, it's very difficult to have passion with a script. What you really want to do is you want to approach virtually every presentation as if you've never seen it before.
I go to places all the time, work in hotels, give speeches, and they always leave me a podium because they assume that podiums are good things. The trouble with podiums is podiums go back to that Winston Churchill type era. Podiums are not basically a good thing because podiums tell the audience exactly what you don't want to tell them, which is, okay, there will forever be this barrier between me and you.
And that's what a podium does. Think about this. This is my little castle, isn't it? This is mine. I've got this turret here where I can fire off stuff at you all. But I'm protected, you know? If you're going to hit me, I've got this. No, it's really true. So we set up this, we tell the audience that I'm going to be behind, there's forever going to be this barrier between me and you. You're you, I mean, never the twain shall meet. Podiums tend to really work against this connectivity that you want to establish with your audience if you want to be effective. So, as you go forth from here tonight, you will be thinking about eye contact. You'll want to be holding eye contact with people through the end of a thought. And when you do, what you'll find is although in the beginning people might, because they've been trained that way, might not look back at you, but just a few minutes into your presentation, you're going to see that people react quite differently than how they've ever reacted before. And the next time you get up to speak and you put this all together, you nail it.